Hello and welcome to Being Reintegrated. My name is Tim Wright, and we are at section 2 of the first chapter called Adam. It says, God, the creator of all. We may well ask what these first beings were before their divine emanation, whether they existed or not. They did exist within the bosom of divinity, but without particular distinction of action, thought, and hearing. They could act and feel solely through the will of the superior being who contained them and in whom all was actuated, which is, in fact, a state of non-existence. However, this existence in God is of absolute necessity, since it constitutes the immensity of divine power. God would not be Father and Master of all things if he did not have an innate in him an inexhaustible source of beings that he emanates by his pure will and whenever it pleases him. It is by this infinite multitude of emanations of spiritual beings outside of himself that he bears the name Creator, and that his works are a divine, spiritual, and temporal animal creation. And, oh my gosh. One of the major parts that I like about this is without distinction of action, thought, and hearing. I really like that. They did exist within the bosom of divinity, but without particular distinction of action, thought, and hearing. So, the action, thought, and hearing are part of the three-circle approach to the Eleukoan. And, you know, they talk about it in the work of the actual order in some of the lessons of Leon, which I highly recommend because as a series of instructions to the Eleukoan of Leon's, Saint-Martin, Villermoz, and Hauterive all kind of got together and gave presentations to their students, I believe to each other, but it could have just been to students because they were trying to reformulate the Eleukoan. And this has been happening since its beginning. Someone comes in, they see the system, they say, nah, I don't so much think that's the way it should be taught, and then they teach it another way. Martinez did it himself with Masonry, and then Saint-Martin, Hauterive, and Villermoz did it with Martinez at the time that Pierre Fournier was his secretary. So there's a academic lecture by Antoine Favre. I don't know how to say that word, so he recently passed. But there's an academic lecture that I have a friend who translated privately that said Pierre Fournier was basically supported by Villermoz, and the reason why they did the lessons of Leon was to essentially kick him out of the group. Now that's challenging information because we don't want to, think that they were intellectual capitalists, but they were. They took their intellectual heritage and they hoarded it. So that is very indicative of the Eleukoan egregore itself, which is, it's an elitism. Eleu is elite, and Cohen is argued in George Quartz's book, probably the best, but it is also talked about in the catechisms of the later, what we call red band, and this is the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th degree of the Eleukoan, which if you're a priest, it'll make a lot of sense to you. If you're not, then basically what it is a bunch of ordinations. So you have the right to say these invocatory names. So it's a really tight system. At first, you're going through the theosophy. So this is what they mean when they relate to distinction of action, thought, and hearing. That the beings that are there don't have to do any operations. There's no prevarication, so they have to do the operations to reintegrate. And I just love that it's put in our terms of our humanity to give us that state of non-existence is no distinction of action, thought, and hearing. So it's not a death cult in the sense that you're not going to be able to have your own individual faculties, which we talked about last time. It says they could act and feel solely through the will of the superior being who contained them and in whom all was actuated. So you see, we are the spirits of creation, and it is in our action, thought, and hearing that we're able to have our existence. But, the things we're talking about right now, these are about non-existence. These are about before the human being had the capacity to understand themselves as a human being acting on the terrestrial immensity, as they call it. But I just love this information because it's divine, spiritual, and temporal animal creation are talked about here. But it says this existence in God is of absolute necessity since it constitutes the immensity of divine power. So if you are not in your divine power, you're only a reflection of your own distinctive action, thought, and hearing. And that is the entire kit and caboodle right there. Are these divine acts that you're operating, or are these your own individual actions, thoughts, and hearings? Because the divine acts exist within divinity itself, and we have created a place where there's distinction. This is exactly what Jung came to in the Red Book. I don't have it on me to quote, but in the Red Book he says, why do I have all this distinction? Why is distinction the thing which is separating me from everyone else? And he saw that what he called ego, or personality, was actually the thing which drew distinction to itself, and that's how he was able to maintain his personality, is because he did a lot of distinguishing of himself. So there's that, and then the other thing that I really liked was it talked about his he emanates by his pure will and whenever it pleases him. So there's a little language confusion there. Whenever is time based, so we got to look at it as these are the words of a human being in the time and space modality. So every now and then we are going to get these kind of faux pas where we're seeing something like that. But what Daskalos, the healer, says is that this God is will pleasure often. So, this goes into the Bomist kind of thought as well, that when the heart opens up in a picture, you'll see here, that the heart is actually the pleasure of divinity. We're able to have desire based on this will pleasure of the divine being, which we are of. So when we feel desire, we feel our divine origin. And I like that it connects desire, and not in a fallen way. We are just human beings who have experienced desire as our God, and it's not bad, but desire, and whatever desires we're talking about, desire for fame, fortune, money, prestige, love, helping, whatever the desire is that moves you into action, thought, and hearing, into your faculties of the lower triangle of reflective light, is how they call it, reflective light. And that is something that we all have to contend with. We have bodies here on Earth, and we have a presence here in the cosmos, sometimes in groups that have actions, thoughts, and hearings. So, not hearings like court hearings, but hearing as a function of the human being you're hearing right now. So, this is an act of creation. When it says God is the creator of all, we want to make sure, I want to make sure to get across the point that this divine immensity is what they're talking about as God. And that is the real creator, not the actions, thoughts, and hearings of its beings. So it's a slight distinction, but it's very important to realize that our actions, our three functions are absolutely necessary and good, but they are not in themselves the terminated causal chain of this complete way of unfolding of understanding. So, the second one isn't that big, just that everything you do is related to the divinity, and that even your function to act is part of the divine plan. That's not much of a commentary. But for those who are struggling with the ideas of self and me and I and mine, that is very helpful stuff. But so that was section 2 of the Treatise of Reintegration, and I hope you enjoyed it. See you for the next episode.